Hi, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I just wanted to thank you all for joining us today. I'm Lauren Moravsky, the Online Giving Revenue and Communications Associate here at Ballotpedia, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this very special briefing. Here at Ballotpedia, our goal is to inform people about politics by providing accurate and objective information about politics at all the levels of government. This is one of the many reasons why we are so excited to share our newest resource with you today, the Election Administration Legislation Tracker. Keeping track of the latest election administration developments in all 50 states can be a daunting task. Our legislation tracker sets a new standard for ease of use and flexibility. Here to debut this new state-of-the-art tool are Ballotpedia's editor-in-chief, Geoff Pallay, and Marquee staff writer, Jerrick. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Lauren, great to be here.
Likewise.
So Geoff, we'd love it if you could start off by telling us a bit about this election legislation tracker.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm really excited to be getting a chance to walk everyone through this tool today. And what we're going to do is take a couple minutes and just talk about the tool. And then what better way to get a chance to play around with it than to screen share and play with the actual tracker itself. So bear with us for a few minutes while Jerrick and I explain how all this works, and then we'll have some fun and screen share and walk through the actual product itself. So our new administration tracker sets a standard for ease of use, flexibility, and raw power. There are more than 150,000 bills typically introduced in state legislative sessions each year. And this specific legislation tracker is focusing on election-related bills, which is right now is about 2,500 bills. Our team provides daily updates on all the bills and other relevant political developments. We have charts, we have graphs, we have maps and other visualizations to help enable really straightforward contextual understanding of the tool. We've translated bill text into summaries and tags that make it really easy to understand. And we'll be producing a weekly executive summary digest that you can sign up for to deliver straight into your inbox if, unlike Jerrick and I, you don't want to spend every day deep within the throes of legislation. And obviously, because it's from Ballotpedia, our tracker it's neutral and non-biased and nonpartisan. So, Jerrick, tell me a little bit about how our process works, and let's tell everyone, how do we find and discover these bills?
Right. So we use a third-party service called Trifecta. What Trifecta does is it scans all of the state legislatures' websites for all legislation, and then dumps all of that data into a single source and standardizes some of the formatting. We then, through Trifecta, we search through each state's bills by, essentially what we've done is we've searched for all bills that make any reference whatsoever to the state's elections code. And then we manually review each and every one of those bills to make sure that it's relevant for our purposes. And we also do some manual curating by applying something we'll discuss later, subject tags and descriptors of legislative status in order to make the information more readily digestible.
Yeah, so is it just a matter of automation and computer-based work, or is there a lot of manual effort that goes into actually reading through the bills?
It's definitely a blend. We rely on an automated process to give us sort of our raw batch of bills. But then in order to really describe them with some sufficient detail and to isolate cases that aren't relevant, we manually review them ourselves. We apply our expertise in reviewing each bill on an individual basis.
Yeah, we're really excited about this product because we felt like journalists and activists and general public really just need access to a neutral and authoritative reality about election laws and bills, especially given the last several years between the COVID regulations and all of the ever-changing dynamics of elections throughout 2020, 2021, and 2022. It's certainly not a very dull time in the world of election legislation tracking. And Jerrick, we've been working on projects like this for almost a decade now. At this point, you and I here at Ballotpedia. So this was really fun for us to get a chance to dig into this. So tell us a little bit more then about how we actually come up with the tagging system here, because this is a lot of bills to keep track of.
It is, and this was a months-long process. We probably invested more time and energy into devising a category structure than in any other single aspect of the tracking system. What we've done is we've identified 22 broad subject areas that relate to election administration. These are things like absentee mail-in voting policy, in-person voting place procedures, redistricting, so on and so forth. Within each of those broader categories, we've created more specific tags to describe what specifically a bill might deal with respect to that broader policy area. So for example, with respect to absentee or mail-in voting policy, a bill might deal with the eligibility requirements for using absentee ballots. A bill might deal with the request process or the return process. We have 88 specific tags to describe with appropriate granularity, excuse me, what each bill actually is changing with respect to the broader policy area.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And I just shared my screen. I think you can all see it now, but some of the stuff we're most excited about for the features on this product are the interactive search function, the infographics, our daily updates, the tagging structure that Jerrick just described, 22 different parent categories and 88 granular tags, bill summaries, and of course, you don't need to sign up for the email. You can just peruse the site and use it as much as to your heart's content. So Jerrick, tell us a little bit about what does that weekly digest, what's that going to look like?
The weekly digest gives you a breakdown of what recent activity has occurred. When you're dealing with 2,500 bills, there's obviously, even during slow times, a considerable amount of activity that's occurring. So for those readers who really don't have the time they don't have the time or the inclination to go through the database, the tracker database itself, we condense all of that into a weekly report. We identify what actions have occurred in the past week. We give broad breakdowns on where all of our bills stand within the legislative process, how many have been enacted, how many have passed both chambers, so on and so forth, and just provide a number of broad-based overview data points along those lines.
Yeah, well, let's just dig right in at this point in time. So I went ahead and sharing my screen now. So you can see this is legislation.ballotpedia.org. Pretty straightforward. So there's lots of links and navigation to get here from the main Ballotpedia website, of course. But here you can see it looks a little different than the standard Ballotpedia architecture, if you're familiar with the standard website. So right here from the homepage, there are two key links that you want to be aware of. There's the bill search function, and then there's the overview data. So let's start with the overview data tab, and I'm going to click into that, and then Jerrick kind of walk us through how we populate this this page here.
So all of these graphics on this page update in real time based on updates we make as we become aware of changes in bills, as bills are introduced, as they move through the legislative process, as they're enacted into law. This first graphic here just breaks down all of the bills we're tracking by their status in the legislative process. Obviously, the vast majority of them have just been introduced and haven't moved forward, but we can see here that there have been 221 enacted into law during the current session. And this, like I said earlier, updates in real time as we make our updates to the database.
Yeah, and one of the things I think is so interesting, we live in the United States with 50 different states, 50 different state governments. They all have different terms for how they tag bills, even just by simple status. So even this little portion here, can you kind of explain how we come up with the groupings here of the bill status types?
Absolutely. Like Geoff was saying, given the federalist system, given that each of the 50 state legislatures operate in slightly different ways, there are any number of different parliamentary procedures and language that are used, and language that is used to describe legislative status. And a lot of that language isn't especially intuitive. And so what we've done is we've tried to simplify that language and really explain in common terms what's going on with the bill. So that's where we've come up with these discrete categories, basically, to describe whether a bill has been introduced, whether it's advanced from committee, passed one chamber, so on and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah, so then what we've done with the data, as well as we've overlaid it with a lot of existing Ballotpedia data. So for instance, Trifecta Status. So now we can look at charts and graphics that show, okay, well, what's the status with bills in Democratic trifectas and how many have been enacted or passed from both chambers or vetoed? And what about Republican trifectas and what does it look like there? Or how about states with divided government? So all of these charts, like Jerrick said, these are all updated in real time every day. And then there's a snapshot with a weekly digest that comes out on, what day of the week does that come out, Jerrick?
That comes out every Friday afternoon.
Yeah, so you can see right here at the top, we've got an email sign up box. And just to kind of look through an example of what one of those might look like. Here's the version from last week. And you can see what we're essentially doing is we're grabbing a snapshot of legislation activity. So Jerrick, kind of walk us through, what does this first bar chart look like here and what's that telling us?
So this first bar chart breaks down activity over the past 2 months, the past 8 weeks. And it's interesting to look from week to week and see, and we also overlay it with trifecta status of states in which bills originate. So you can see, for instance, during May 20th and May 27th, there was a great deal of activity, relatively speaking, and that most of that activity was occurring in Republican states. Obviously, as we've moved into the summer, activity has dipped quite considerably, but there's still quite a bit of activity going on.
Yeah, last week alone, there were 9 bills enacted, 2 in Democratic trifectas, 3 in Republican trifectas, and 4 in divided governments. So each week the digest will look something like this, and it'll come, straight to your inbox, or you can find it on ballotpedia.org, or you can find it on Ballotpedia News. And this is just a great way to, again, to contextualize all the many bills that are moving through the different state legislatures throughout this session. And we're excited for next session as well, as we really only just now wrapped up. Most of the states are getting ready to end their sessions for the even year. So let's go back to really the heart of the site, which is the bill search function. So I can get there from the top toolbar here. There's a bill search link, or you can get there from the home page and click on bill search as well. And so you can see, as Jerrick alluded to earlier, there are 8 distinct different search functions. So Jerrick, kind of walk us through what each of the different ones we have here are and how they all work.
Sure. So the first one here is keyword search. If, for instance, you've heard of a bill in your state that has a particular title, you can enter that title here and pull up that bill. Likewise, if you know the bill's number that you're interested in learning about, you can enter it in the bill number field. Most recent action, if you're interested in seeing which bills have been acted upon most recently in the past month, you can select that within this calendar dropdown. There are a few pre-filled fields here. You can look for today, you can look for the calendar year, last month, this month, so on. For state, you can search within a single state, you can search for all states, you can search for some combination of states. For current bill status, you can again select one or select multiple. And topics, this is where you can either select very granular topics. If, for instance, you're interested in bills that deal with permanent absentee mail-in voting lists, you can simply select that one tag. If, on the other hand, you want to deal with all bills that deal with contest-specific procedures, you can select that as well. And you can select as many of these or as few as you like. Under sponsor party, the same principle operates, and likewise with trifecta status.
Yeah, so really the possibilities are limitless for how you could search here. So can you bookmark these links? Can you share them? How does that all work?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you conduct a search, Geoff, example for, let's say, Indiana, and you want to see all bills that have been enacted in Indiana, you can search for that. And then if you want to share that with somebody, all you have to do is copy the link and send it to them. And this exact search will pop up for them.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the fun things you can do then is, let's say you want to clear the search, and let's say I'm really curious about any introduced bills in the area of ballot access, and I hit search. So I can see there are currently 245 bills in that current status. Now you can bookmark that link, and you can come back as frequently as you like, and you're going to see the most recent bills added. Maybe you want to see only the bipartisan sponsored bills. Maybe you only want to see bipartisan sponsored bills in trifecta governments, not divided state governments. So we've got 10 bills here that have been introduced in this setting. So let's go ahead and click on one of those. So in New Hampshire, we can see this bill called Relative to Qualifications for Office. It has 2 tags on it. So once we click on it, Jerrick, what are we seeing here on this specific page?
So what you'll see here is information right up at the top about what topics are dealt with in the bill. In this case, ballot access policies for candidates and vacancy procedures. Under the overview tab, you'll see the official name of the bill, the state, the bill number, basic identifying information, a description of legislative status, the number of votes that have been recorded for that bill, and the number of sponsors attached to the bill. You'll also see under that link, you can see the full text of the bill. You'll also see under partisanship that you can see what the partisan affiliation is of the sponsors, whether it was sponsored by a bipartisan group or some other combination, and you can see the state trifecta status. And finally, under action, you can see the most recent action as reported by the legislature itself, and the date of that action and days since the last action.
Yep. Yeah, so this is great. So these are all individual unique links. So you can share this on Twitter or on Facebook, or you can email it around. And then let's say you get really excited about this and you say, well, I'm curious, what other bills have there been that relate to vacancy procedures? So then you can click there. Now you're going to be taken back to the search page, and you can see there are 94 bills, and you can you can restart kind of your search process. And maybe you're curious about whether there have been any bills that have been actually enacted in the area of vacancy procedures. Go search again. Now I'm finding there are 16 different bills. And then you can kind of scroll through the results and see if any of them are of interest to you. So once you want to restart again, go ahead and hit clear search. We have some popular searches hard coded in at the very top that we thought would kind of be the most commonly ones used, like enacted bills or bills enacted upon in the past week, the absentee mail voting bills, introduced bills in the past week, etc. So let's go ahead and over to the FAQ page. It's because it's pretty intuitive and straightforward, the site, but we've got a walkthrough video here on how the site works, a whole basic breakdown of how the information, where we get the information from, what the status indicators mean, what most recent action means, and a definition for all the different subject category tags that we put together. And then some tips for kind of some best ways to use the search function. So there's just a lot of really exciting data here that we're thrilled to be able to put this this tool out there available for you. So Jerrick, what are some other things that you would want to walk through on the bill search page that users should know about?
I mean, like you said earlier, I think it's a very intuitive interface. I would just want to emphasize, as you already have, that it's really fascinating to be able to, it's wonderful to be able to put together so many combinations of factors. Something unique that Ballotpedia brings to this space is overlaying the trifecta status information, for instance. That's one of my favorite things to do when I'm playing with the data.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think it's so fascinating to look at something like, okay, so let's say it's a Democratic trifecta, and the sponsor is a Democratic Party legislator, and the bill was vetoed. Because you wouldn't expect to see that too often, but well, there was one bill in California that was vetoed by Governor Newsom, even though it was introduced in a Democratic trifecta state and was sponsored by a Democrat. Or we might want to look for maybe some Republican Party sponsored bills in Democratic trifecta states that were enacted. Do any of those exist? Zero. Not entirely unsurprising to see something like that, but again, it's to Jerrick's point, the trifecta status and the sponsor party and the topic, those are all really exciting, unique layers of data that we've added onto the bill search to allow users to really just understand all of the ever-changing and very rapidly evolving dynamics of election legislation. So what's next for this tool, Jerrick, for us?
Well, what we'll be doing now is we'll be going through the bills again, and we'll be writing individual summaries in plain English. We'll be starting with enacted bills and then moving from there. And then we'll just be keeping the database current. Every day we review the most recent legislative actions and update this data set accordingly. And we look forward to doing this for years to come.
Yeah, exactly. Bill summaries are a really fascinating part of state legislative bill tracking, because it's not like the bill summaries that come from the official state government websites are in legal jargon. They're really hard to parse through. So we want to make them really concise and easy to understand and digestible. So we were excited to put all that together and have everything debuted and ready for 2023 sessions and beyond that. So yeah, we're just really excited to launch this tool. And Lauren, we're going to kick it over to you for questions now.
Absolutely. So as always, for any of our attendees, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A box. Otherwise, we did have a couple questions coming from the audience prior to the beginning of the webinar, beginning with how many bills are there and how many have we been tracking?
So there are currently, let me remind myself, there are currently 2,514 bills that we're tracking in the database that deal with some aspect of election policy. And we're actively tracking all of those. If any action occurs on any of them, we become aware within a business day and make our updates accordingly.
Great. And then how many of those bills have been enacted?
So total for the session is something, or for the session year, is something along the lines of, let's see here. So 221 bills have been enacted during the current session. So that includes some bills from last year, most of them from this year. If we consider only those bills that were enacted this calendar year, we're looking at 164 bills as of today.
Wonderful. And we did just have a question come in from the audience. And how would one search for open primary related bills?
Oh, that's a great question. So that is something that would be encompassed within our within the topic for under alternative voting methods. You would search for non-traditional primaries. That would encompass things like open primaries, top 4 and top 5, various other proposed reforms along those lines.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I just went ahead and searched that in here. So under topic, I went down to, like Jerrick said, non-traditional primaries. I see there are 4 bills. And then I can go ahead and click through those bills if I want to understand, okay, well, this bill is dead. Let's learn a little more about it. Why is it dead? Maybe some other topics, Jerrick, I was thinking that you might even want to include there. There was a couple other ones I thought that might work. Primary systems, that might work as well. What do you that's another one that I think you could include. And again, so you could include multiple different tags, and that would give you some options to look through as well.
Great. And then also, while you're on the topic of tags, earlier you showed on the FAQ page, we do have quite a number of tags. Do we ever add new tags?
Yes, we do. In fact, as we were, we initially started with a much smaller list of tags. We began by sort of hypothesizing what could the bills conceivably address. And as we engaged in our review, we of course found that there were a lot of bills that were being introduced that didn't fit into our initial buckets. And so as we review bills, as new bills are introduced, if they don't fit within an existing tag, then we can create a new tag very easily to account for that. And in fact, we have just in the past few weeks, we've added tags for mandatory voting, having come across 1 or 2 bills that deal with that subject, bills that deal with online voting specifically. There aren't too many bills within those categories, but there's a great deal of flexibility in enabling us to, yeah, Geoff, if you go to topic, it's under, oh gosh, where is mandatory voting?
Yep, I've got it.
You've got it, yeah. So yeah, you can see there's 1 bill here from West Virginia, it looks like. So, and that's just one example. That's something that we can respond, like as circumstances evolve, as new developments occur, legislation inevitably follows after that. And so if there's some trend that emerges, we can quickly create a new tag to deal with that and capture the legislation accordingly.
Yeah, and bills, depending on their complexity, can have 1 or dozens of different tags applied to them, depending on what is actually in the bill.
Great. And then just for any of our attendees that would maybe want to sign up for that legislation tracker weekly digest, can you just walk through again the couple options that people have to sign up?
Yeah, absolutely. So from the homepage of legislation.ballotpedia.org, there's a little sign up box at the very bottom to subscribe to our weekly digest, and you can go ahead and plug your email in there and hit subscribe. It's free. It'll come straight to your inbox on Fridays, or you can find the same sign up on the overview data page as well, or on ballotpedia.org, where we've got sort of the bulk of our 330,000 articles. There's a sign up box here as well. So lots of different options for places you can go to sign up.
Thanks for walking us through that again, Geoff. And then we did actually just have another question come through, in that, do we report on enacted bills that get overturned by the courts?
That's a really good question. That certainly does happen at times. That typically would not change the bill status as it's being brought in. So Jerrick, I think that's something that we would not currently do at this time, but that's probably a good feature for us to consider adding later this year. But what do you think?
Yeah, I would say that's right. It's something that wouldn't necessarily bear directly on the legislative status of the bill. It wouldn't change the fact that the bill had been enacted into law. So that's something we would still want to record as such. But it would be, depending on how often that happens, which it does happen with some frequency, that's a feature we could add in the future. I will add that if that were to happen, if say a state were to enact a piece of legislation that was later overturned by the Supreme Court or a state Supreme Court, in all likelihood, that's something we would cover as a news item on Ballotpedia. So we would cover it just in a different part of our content structure.
Yeah, and a couple of that reminds me. So as I said, kind of at the top of this call, a lot of this work of ours, has been going on since 2017. But we did a lot of work in 2020 with what we called our help desk, covering the lawsuits, the legislation, the changes that were made to election laws. So that's probably where that would come up more. So I'm just trying to do a quick screen share of an example of that. So in 2020, this was an article that we published about post-election lawsuits, where we tracked all the different lawsuits that came as a result of the presidential election. But then we also had coverage of elections and recounts before the election as well. So this is something that we've tracked pretty extensively over the years. We tracked, hundreds of different lawsuits around. I think it's like, was it even thousands, Jerrick, actually last election cycle? How many really was it in 2020 that you were tracking?
If memory serves, before the election itself, we tracked something like 400 lawsuits disputing various aspects of election administration. And of course, that was somewhat anomalous given that it was the year the pandemic really began. But yeah, it is something where we've extensively covered litigation in the past and expect to continue to do so in some way.
Yep. Yeah. Great questions.
And as always, for anyone that's watching this webinar, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us at editor@ballotpedia.org. We're happy to answer any and all questions you may have. As some of you may know, Ballotpedia is a 501c3 nonprofit. So if you'd like to support our work, you can visit ballotpedia.org/donate. We really appreciate it. And Geoff and Jerrick, thank you so much for joining us today to walk us through this exciting new resource.
Thanks, Lauren. We're excited to have it out there. So share it around. Have fun with it.
Thanks, everyone.